Are you looking for a handheld that has a GameCube-inspired paint job, can play PlayStation 2 games fantastically, and has a phenomenal screen for those 8-bit style games that use blacks and just looks, ooh, so good? Well, this is the Retroid Pocket 5, and it checks a lot of those boxes. And remember, we'll be giving away a Trim UI brick at the end of December, so remember to be subscribed to this channel and also the LIT NXT giveaway channel down below. They're the ones sponsoring the giveaway for December. Now back to the Retroid Pocket 5. This thing is a very interesting piece of hardware. Retroid has been making these handhelds pretty frequently over the last few years, and this is their Retroid Pocket 5. This is the newest piece into their lineup. They have a small version of this, the Retroid Pocket Mini, and the larger version, which is this one. And I think they've done a very, very nice job of putting a nice piece of glass over the whole thing and pairing it with a stunning looking screen. So let's dive into the hardware and look at the rest of this thing, because it is just designed incredibly well. And the fantastic design starts with a 5.5-inch AMOLED 1080p by 60 FPS screen, a 5000 milliamp hour battery, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1. This thing has an arsenal of upgraded hardware, in addition to a very big, nice piece of glass on the front that makes the whole thing feel like just that screen just fades away into the background. It just looks phenomenal. We also have a D-pad that is squishy and not clicky, two Hall Effect joysticks that have a light bar under them that are clicky and not squishy. The Start, Select, Home, and Back buttons are all clicky and not squishy, and they managed to get those speakers in little pods facing directly out at you, and they are very loud. They're very nice, and they look like they're in a little capsule too, which I think is kind of cool. They also have A, B, X, Y buttons that are squishy and not clicky, and that's it for the front. On the sides we have nothing but some bumps to hold on to, and on the bottom we have an SD card slot, a headphone jack, and a USB-C port, and on the top we have a volume rocker that is clicky and not squishy, and a clicky and not squishy power button. On the back we have some absolutely massive ventilation. The whole back is basically open with some fancy grill pattern here, in addition to the Retroid Pocket logo on the bottom and an exhaust port on the top. And that's it. They got rid of all the frills and just made this thing exactly what they needed to. And for the Retroid Pocket 5, they did a bunch of different colorways. This one is the GameCube inspired version here, and I think they did a pretty good job of matching all the colors to this original controller. So, as I mentioned before, this is not their first one in the lineup. This is the Retroid Pocket 5. So that means there are a bunch of other iterations of these types of devices. And the only thing I was disappointed this time around is on kind of the color choices. They did pick some interesting colors, and I like the GameCube homage from the controller. And I think they did a pretty good job of picking the right colors and all that stuff. But I do miss the look of the Retroid Pocket 4 and all the other previous Retroids, where they do the clear plastic and kind of make it look like it's a retro handheld. They still went with the D-pad on the top versus the sticks, and that's kind of where I was a little confused. So they still went with like the retro ABXY and the D-pad on the top for seemingly retro games, but then made it a more modern console, and it feels a lot more modern with ergonomic grips and the nice huge flat piece of glass on the front, and also that awesome OLED screen. And I would think like this thing for game streaming would be awesome, but with the sticks at the bottom, you kind of have to jam your thumbs down there and you kind of hold the whole thing like side to side versus the entire thing. To me, it was just an odd decision because it's a fantastic device. I'm not sure why they would put the D-pad and buttons at the top instead of the sticks, because that's what you're mainly going to be using for a device of this caliber. Maybe they just didn't expect it to be that good. But there's a lot more to this device, so let's look at the software and go through that. And we have a bunch to talk about this software because this is running Android, where we have all the Android games you could possibly think of running on here, in addition to tons of emulation. So stuff like Diablo Immortal will have no problem running here, in addition to things like cloud gaming. Xbox Game Pass and whatever streaming service you'd like works great on here. I wasn't able to get PlayStation's app to go back to not having the on-screen controls, but once I was able to get those away, they didn't really fully go away. It didn't recognize that it had a controller. I was able to use the on-screen controls to use this and Retroid's nice mapping software that they have. So for games that are touch only, you can actually map some of the buttons to the game, which makes it playing just so much better. But in conjunction with all of those different Android games and streaming services, we have emulation, and this thing hits like a truck. Everything from the 8 and 16-bit eras run awesome on this thing. The scaling works really well because on the OLED screen here, the only pixels that are on are the ones being lit up. So if you're running a game that has blacks in it, for say the Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance here, you're actually gonna see black because they just won't illuminate that pixel, which makes any sort of bars or borders you have here, if you have the black model, just feel like it's not there at all. And this is the Retroid Pocket Mini I have here to show you how those black levels look for a Game Boy Advance. It looks so good. So if you're looking to do 8 and 16-bit gaming or anything pixelated like that on this device, definitely think about the black version of this if you're not going to be playing 16:9 content all the time, because man, this thing, very nice. When we move up the power scale a little bit though, and get to stuff like the N64, Dreamcast, all that kind of stuff, everything here plays very well. We can move up the power band relatively quickly because this thing just absolutely crushes a ton of different games. The PlayStation 1, the PSP, the Nintendo DS, the PlayStation 2, and even all the way up to the Switch is emulated very well on this device. This thing has as much power as you want it to emulate pretty much anything you want to on this. Now you won't be getting like PS3 emulation or anything like that on here because there really isn't any good ports for Android. This thing basically gets any sort of emulation you want done and really looks good doing it. I'm not going to be showing any Switch emulation right now because Nintendo and their ninjas are out throwing shurikens at anything that'll move. So it does. It does everything you think it does. It plays very well. And it plays tons of games because it's got a half-decent chipset in it, and it's got a nice, fast OLED panel. So if you're looking for Switch emulation, I think it does well for this, in addition to all the other stuff mentioned previously in the voiceover section. This does bring us to other options on the market though, because this is a category that's kind of full at this point. Embernick has a cheap offering for this type of handheld, in addition to the iNode Mini. That one's a fantastic offering and is around the same type of ergonomics. It also looks like a PS Vita, and in addition to that has micro LED screen, which is just awesome. That thing is bright as hell, but this is also really bright. So I don't know, it's got some stiff competition, but they did price it correctly. So it's really up to your preferences at this point. I think these are small, in addition to comparing it to something like the Retroid Pocket Mini, because the Mini also is small and has basically the same functionality all the way up to the PS2. So I think it does really well. I think Retroid has completely knocked it out of the park for their next upgrade from the Retroid Pocket 4. It is coming a little bit faster, iteration after iteration, because I'm pretty sure we got the 4 at the beginning of this year, and then the 4 Pro, and then this one. So, anyone from Retroid, if you'd like to reach out and talk to me, I think their devices are fantastic, but I do think there's a little work to be done just in design choices. That's all I have for you today. Check out one of these videos that I mentioned earlier if you're looking for the Retroid Pocket. Odin 2 Mini, or the old Retroids, because they're here too. So maybe you can get them for cheaper, and maybe you're just going to use them for streaming. I don't know. All right, talk to you later. Bye.